It's Get Outta Here. I'm Warren Levinson. This week we're going to Ukraine. There's been a lot written about Ukraine lately, most of it impeachment-related, a little, tangentially, about the ongoing war with Russia over control over the eastern half of the country. We're going to the other side of the country altogether. Chernivtsi is a city of about 250,000 in southwest Ukraine near the border with Romania. It and the surrounding region, called Bukovina, have been over the centuries under the control of Romania, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and of course the Soviet Union. Today, it is a charming college town filled with architecturally significant buildings that managed to escape the destruction of 2 world wars and Soviet homogenization. Its university is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Frances D'Amelio, a reporter in the Associated Press Rome Bureau, paid a visit last summer, and she joins us now to tell us where she went, what she saw, and what she ate. So, Frances D'Amelio, you went to Chernivtsi last summer. Have I got that pronunciation right?
You did indeed. Its spelling varies because it's transliterated from Ukrainian, but that is the pronunciation, Chernivtsi.
Right. It's a place that has had many names over the years and over the centuries. What drew you there in the first place? I know that it is sometimes nicknamed the Vienna on the Prut, which that would be enough for me.
I had been there many, many years ago, multiple times for family reasons. I adopted my daughter there, and I always wanted to go back when I had some time, and I went back with her after a distance of 19 years, maybe. And it was fascinating just to go there as a tourist and not be distracted by bureaucracy. So that's what drew us there, mainly to learn more about this city.
And what surprised you about it?
Well, it confirmed a feeling that I had, that it was a special place. I have traveled through Eastern Europe for both pleasure and work over the past decade. And, some of the architecture, especially in parts of the former Soviet Union, is not terribly brilliant. A lot of the nice architecture was trashed under the Soviet regime, and boring, uniform housing blocks and office blocks were put up. And Chernivtsi was spared that. And so it has a nickname of Little Vienna sometimes Little Prague, the Paris. There's all kind of nicknames. And it's mainly because of its architecture, which remarkably escaped unscathed from the remodeling and renovation when Ukraine was under the part of the Soviet Union.
And what kind of architecture are we talking about?
Well, most of it dates back to when the region was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So yes, you could walk down some of these streets, and the buildings and the houses have these lovely pastel colors and these almost like fairyland details to them, which remind you of a street in, say, Vienna. So, they're very elegant, and it's surprising because much of Ukraine is still very poor. You just have to go to the countryside to see it. So that this has remained in this way over the centuries is very charming and very precious.
And at the center of this is a university built in a former, regal residence. Tell me about it.
Yeah, it's just not the residence locally. It was a residence of some Orthodox officials called metropolitans, and it was built in the 19th century, the latter part of the 19th century, and eventually it became the home of a university. And it's really an impressive assembly of various buildings. There are classrooms, or some of the benches and desks in there date back to the 19th century. They're still used. There's a domed church. You go inside. It has Orthodox styling and mosaics. There are gorgeous grounds that you can walk around, including a garden, very tranquil island in the middle of the bustling city. And it's known for its beauty, and many couples, when they are about to get married and they want to have a wedding shoot, photographic shoot done, they go there. Or after graduation, you might go there with your family to have your photos taken. It's a very special part for people who live in the city.
And how open is it to visitors? How welcoming is it?
It's very welcome. People go in all the time. Again, many are locals or other Ukrainians from other parts who want to have their photo taken in there. You walk through a gate; it's open. There's a guard there, but for the most part, you just go in. You say you want to take a photo, whatever, have a stroll and look around, or walk in the gardens, and you're allowed to do it. And they do have guided tours, which I did. Prices are rather modest. I don't remember what I paid, but a couple of dollars perhaps equivalent. And they're given pretty much on the hour. You can sign up for them or just wait your turn till your language comes. I did a guided tour in English, and we started looking at the church, which was quite impressive, the interior. We went to some of the old classrooms with mirrored halls. It was quite impressive. And then you end up on a terrace, which gives you a sweeping view of the lawns, of the gardens, and it was just a very pleasant tour.
And how open is Chernivtsi itself to visitors? How welcoming? How much of a destination from around Europe and around the world?
Well, it's very welcoming. I think part of that is due to the fact that it's a university city. So there are a lot of young people. Young people tend to be curious. They want to try out their English or some other language. And some cities in Eastern Europe are not that friendly sometimes. This, I think, because of the university is, there aren't that many tourists outside of Europe. We saw some Germans, of course, many Ukrainians, some Poles were there, and some Asians were coming through. So it's a mix now for its architecture, and it's just a kind of different place to be.
You write about eating well there, so tell us about the food.
Yeah, you have to like Eastern European food. It's very hearty, but it goes beyond cliches of just sausage and cabbage. And I grew up with it in my family. My grandmother was a Polish cook, so I appreciate good cooking. It's reasonable, very reasonable to eat in restaurants in much of Eastern Europe, not just Ukraine, but particularly in Ukraine. Each city, pretty much each region will have its own special way to make borscht, for example. In Ukraine, they'll throw in all kinds of vegetables besides meats, and even a hard-boiled egg. There are stuffed cabbage rolls. You can have them very tiny. You can have them bigger. They put onions in, raisins in, ground meat. All things of that. Sausage, of course. And many countries in Eastern Europe have their variations of dumplings. In Poland, for example, it's pierogi. In Ukraine, they also have their dumplings that they're proud of, known as vareniki, and we had them in different ways. And once they had the dough stained purple from beet juice, another place it was stained green from green vegetables, and each one was stuffed very plumply with ground meat. So, and then the soups are wonderful, often with mushrooms. And the vegetables are totally fresh because they just get it from the markets in the countryside, and it's a refreshing change from some other places where the vegetables are trucked in from long distances.
You mentioned cucumbers at breakfast. What's with the cucumbers?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say the food in Eastern Europe, again, my maternal side of my family was of Polish origin, so I was kind of used to it. I've been to Poland many, many times. But there's something about the way they serve cucumbers and tomatoes. They're omnipresent. You get them at breakfast. you'll get them in late evening with little tiny sandwiches called canapes. And it was like that in Ukraine. In the morning, again, as I mentioned, food is extremely cheap. We have the option at our hotel, very simple hotel, of having a homemade breakfast for a couple dollars each. We went for it, and we were very happy we did. The lady who worked at the hotel made blinis, those flat pancakes. There was fresh jam, very fluffy, fresh eggs from the farms nearby, and there are always sliced cucumbers and tomatoes, which to some people you might say, why would I want cucumbers salad for breakfast? Believe me, they were tangy, they were tasty, and I ate them all every morning.
It's Get Out of Here, the AP Travel Podcast. More on Francis D'Amelio's trip to Chernivtsi after a break. It's Get Out of Here. Now back to Francis D'Amelio and Chernivtsi. One of the things that makes this area a UNESCO World Heritage Site, obviously the architecture, but it has a long history of control by many different authorities over the centuries. I mean, this is a region that straddles Ukraine and Romania. So I'm just kind of wondering, is there an overwhelming joy to the place, sadness to the place, or am I just sort of pushing a little too hard for something that might be there?
No, not at all. I mean, when you had asked before about what visitors come, for example, I ran into some Israelis, some Bulgarians, and who were Jewish tourists, and they were there to basically find their Jewish roots, because the area we're talking about is very proudly known among the people as Bukovina, which is a name which means beechwood, like the beechwood tree in Romanian, and it spans the Carpathian Mountains. And for a while it was like a kingdom. One side was in Romania, one side was in Ukraine, and politics separated that, and now Bukovina is separated in parts of two countries, Romania and Ukraine, in the southwest corner of Ukraine. It had a long succession of rulers and various influences dating back to the Huns. Chernivtsi and the Bukovina region for a long while was under the Ottomans, and then eventually it passed to the Austro-Hungarian rulers. There was also a very flourishing Jewish population in Bukovina, and you see it there. We went to a very tiny but informative Jewish museum, which talks about the local Jewish life there, which was uprooted and largely exterminated, as happened in much of Eastern Europe during World War II. And a lot of people come back to try to find their roots, they're part of the diaspora, to find out what was this special city. So you run into them there. In the guest book, for example, in the museum, there were their signatures from all parts of the world, and they mentioned that's what had brought them back there, to try to discover their roots. The cemetery is quite moving. The Jewish cemetery is on the outskirts of town. We took a taxi there. Taxis are extremely reasonably cheap. For like a few dollars, you can go quite a distance. And we wandered through the cemetery, the Jewish cemetery, which was, for all practical purposes, abandoned. It's strewn with weeds. The tombstones are all a jumble. Many are overturned. It's still open, but you can read the dates on it. You can see the beautiful decorations, and that testifies to what was once a very flourishing, proud culture in the city of Chernivtsi and the surrounding region.
Yeah, I read somewhere that actually it was home to the world's first Yiddish language conference in 1906, so this had to be kind of a flourishing Jewish community.
Yeah, and I believe, I would have to check my facts on it, but I believe in Ukraine and perhaps in this area, Isaac Singer came from there. So, yes, it was Yiddish and the culture. You see it very strongly in this museum, looking at the clothing, looking at the implements of daily life. And it's very poignant because obviously it is no more. And there are some grassroots efforts to pay tribute to this once very lively population in Chernivtsi.
Does Chernivtsi feel like a multicultural city, or it is basically Ukrainian now? I mean, or Ukrainian with a little bit of something else thrown in?
Yeah, no, I think it's mainly Ukrainian. As I said, it's tucked in the southwest corner, and there's mountains behind it. It's not very easy to get to by transport, I would say. The only airline that flies there is a once daily flight from Kiev. There used to be one from Romania I took in the past. It doesn't exist anymore. Or you can take a very long train ride, which we did from Lviv, and went down there, or you drive. So I think that you could also take an overnight train from Kiev. So it's not easy to get there. So that's one reason why you don't have very many different peoples coming in. For the most part, they're Ukrainians. If you leave out the students, I did take a course, a language course, when I was there those 2 weeks, a private, with one of the university professors, along with my daughter. It was quite reasonable. There was a group of Norwegian students coming in to learn the Ukrainian language the next month, I understood. So you do get that flux in. You see some of the variation, for example, on the main strolling street. There is still a small Romanian community. They have a cultural center there. They were playing Romanian music one night when I went by. There was some Polish influence still there. We ate one night in a Georgian restaurant, not Georgian U.S., but Georgian former Soviet Union. Yeah, there are some different ethnic strains. For the most part, though, what you hear in the street is Ukrainian.
And finally, this is in the southwest of Ukraine, on the Romanian border. So how much is this affected by the Russian war of conquest in the eastern half of the country?
Yeah, some people have all asked me that. Why did I want to go there? Wasn't I worried? It's two different realities for the most part, because the conflict, the violent conflict that's gone on for years now, is in the far east of Ukraine, going towards the Russian border, and this is on the completely opposite end of it. And a very Western Ukraine is very Western thinking, more projected to the west as opposed to Eastern Ukraine. You hear mainly Ukrainian in the street. If you go to parts of Eastern Ukraine, or even Kiev, you will hear Russian, more Russian. As I said, this part is mainly Ukrainian. In terms of any worries or violence, there was none at all. We did, strolling along the street one night, saw a group of musicians, and there were some people just applauding and listening to them. And they had a little transparent box on the cobblestone pavement where people could throw some Ukrainian money in it. And it was for basically the soldiers who were fighting at the front in eastern Ukraine, and that was the only evidence that the war was playing out in the far end of the country. But certainly that area where I went to was extremely safe. And again, it's religion-wise, it's Orthodox for the most part there. If you go a little farther north, there's Eastern Rite Catholics. Towards the Polish border, again, they're very Western-looking in mentality, where the eastern part of Ukraine is very much tied culturally more to Russia. And the difference it plays out quite clearly in the different parts of the country.
Francis D'Amelio, thank you very much for this. I really appreciate your taking the time to tell us about your trip.
It was great. I was delighted to be in the city. I discovered more corners that I had expected to. I was pleasantly surprised, and I certainly would say to anyone that wants to go there, it's worth going out of your way a little bit travel-wise to get there if you're interested in exploring Eastern Europe.
And what did your daughter think about this? 19 years later, this place, this is where I got you.
Yeah, she was very little when she left, so She really didn't, and she really didn't know the sea at all. So it was a complete exploration for her. And she enjoyed it very, very much, and especially in the evening, it's all very laid back. People walk up and down the main street. They get all dressed up. We had a very pleasant time. So yes, it was a nice discovery, a rediscovery for me, and a discovery for her.
AP Rome correspondent Frances D'Amelio and her daughter went to Chernivtsi last summer. She wrote about the trip last fall. Pull her story out of the archives if you'd like more. It's worth a look. Oh, and one fact-check note. Isaac Bashevis Singer, the 1978 Nobel Prize winner in literature, was born in 1902 in Poland, not in Chernivtsi or the surrounding Bukovina region, so no need to send us any corrective email. And now, my favorite trip. You may remember AP New York correspondent Deepti Hajela from her reporting last spring on the opening of the Hudson Yards development in Manhattan. When I asked her the other day about her favorite trip in decades of traveling, she replied without hesitation, 2005 visit to Antarctica. A great trip.
My favorite trip ever. It's just the most remote place you can go to, and it is so elemental. It is water and ice and clouds, and that's it.
Why'd you go?
Because it was far away, and I wanted to see, and it was different, and I wanted to see a place that you can't normally get to.
How long were you there?
Not long at all. If I remember correctly, probably about a week, less than a week total.
Okay, a week of water and clouds and ice. I mean, shouldn't there be more? I mean, maybe not nightclubs, but something else to see?
It's just, you don't need anything else, right? Because it is unlike any other place on Earth. And you're just so continually amazed at the glaciers and the penguins and the isolation that it's just awe-inspiring.
Was it cold?
No, because the time of the year when they bring visitors to Antarctica, at least at that time, is the warmer time in the southern hemisphere. So it's not warm, but if I recall correctly, it was probably in the 40s or so, which is they're not bad for the southernmost point of the planet.
Now, year-round residents are in the scientific station, so you don't get close to that, or do you, or what's the...
No, I think this was coastal Antarctica. So I don't know what the possibilities are for treks to, like, the actual South Pole. I'm sure there are research scientists and that kind of person there, but no, where we were was on the coast.
Okay, and you told your friends you're going to Antarctica, and they said...
Where? Why? What? Basically.
Mm-hmm. But it was great.
Yes, it was amazing.
Did you have any sense, of course, in climate change world, we're concerned about melting of the polar ice at both poles. Did you have any sense of melting there, or would you be curious to go back and see if it looked any different because of melting that might have taken place in the last 15 years?
I think I would almost be too afraid to go back for precisely that reason, to think, wow, it didn't used to look like this. To see the climate change that I know has happened, I think would be hard for me. It would hurt.
Mm-hmm. How'd you like the penguins?
They're awfully cute, but they're awfully messy.
Deepti Hajela, a reporter in the AP's New York City bureau, about her 2005 trip to Antarctica. And yes, we are working on an Antarctic update with somebody who's been there more recently. Listen for it wherever you stream or download your podcasts. And that's the show. Get Out of Here is a production of the Associated Press in partnership with Westwood One, produced under the supervision of Peter Costanzo and Nikessa Moody. I'm Warren Levinson. We'll see you next time.